Hello, I'm Anthony. Gain staging's possibly the most important technical aspect of writing a song. If, like me, you take care of all of the technical processes of writing a piece of music, this is the one that you really need to get right. I'm currently remixing a song that I wrote a couple of years ago, and I've encountered some pretty heinous mistakes that I made in recording this song, so I'm going to show you some of them. Hopefully you can avoid making these mistakes yourself. I'm going to show you a couple of examples today. The first one is with this wah track. Now, this was recorded basically clean. I recorded the guitar clean and used Amplitude to create the sound that you're hearing. So as you can see, all of the audio signals, all of the levels of these individual audio files are all absolutely well behaved. I'm going to pick on this single little note, and if we head up into audio statistics, this shows you some pretty important information about this audio file. And for today's purposes, the most important value, right down at the bottom, the max true peak level. That number should never be above 0, and I really mean never. There's no excuse for digital clipping your audio. It means you've basically recorded it too hot. When it's come in, all of the signal cannot be captured because the input level is too high and stuff gets thrown away. You've just lost audio data that you didn't intend to lose. This is not some artistic, fancy design. You've made a mistake. So make sure this number's never above 0. Now, minus 1.7 is close, but close is fine. Anything below 0 is okay, it's controllable, and everything above 0 isn't. So we've successfully passed hurdle number 1. We've got the audio recorded safely, we haven't gone above 0, everything's good. Let's have a look at the mixer. So we're going to concentrate on this wah 2 track. I've got an insight meter up at the top. If I open this and reset it, you'll see that it's rounded up, but minus 1.77 is the true peak value we're looking for, and there it is. So there's insight correctly identifying that's the level of the audio when it first comes into this track. So right at the top of the insert strip, there's nothing else happened. This is basically the audio file itself that you're seeing represented in that number. Have a look down in the mixer. So wah 2 feeds into this sub bus. Let's see if there's any evidence down below of any problem at all. And the answer's no. There's no red marks. Nothing's gone above 0. Nothing appears to be clipping. Well, meters are tricky things because they can record both outputs and inputs. At the moment, all of the meters in this mixer are post-pan readings, which means basically right at the very end of the mixing chain, what you're seeing in this meter is the output level of the meter. Let's have a look at the input levels. If I right click on a track, go to global meter settings, I can change the meter position such that it's input. Okay, so there's our minus 1.8, exactly as we expected. Now, it's really difficult to see the wah sub. The font colours, sometimes they make me sad, but it says minus 0.7. In other words, still absolutely fine, very well behaved. So as far as the meter's concerned, there's still nothing wrong. The inputs and outputs to these tracks look completely fine. Here comes the sad moment. I'm going to move my meter underneath this instance of Amplitude. Oh dear. True peak of 3.5. This Amplitude plugin is too hot. So what's basically happening is the audio signal's coming in. It's a pretty hot signal already, minus 1.7. That's quite close. That's quite close to clipping. You've not got much room to play with there. And I've played with too much. Inside this instance of Amplitude, I'm pushing that signal too much and I'm clipping. You watch the output level. There we go. That's what I've missed. Inside the plugin itself, the signal is clipping. The reason it's not visible inside Cubase is because I've got the level of this track turned down. So I've got the track turned down to minus 3.6. So the signal that's coming out of this thing has basically been brought back under control. I've used this slider, the mixer slider, to correct, to give myself what I thought was that that headroom. The problem is that the damage has already been done. In passing through this guitar plugin, the signal coming out of this thing is too hot and it's clipping. So what I need to do in order to fix this problem is fix this plugin. Every single stage of your gain structure needs to be well behaved. Now the signal coming into this thing is okay, the signal coming out is too hot. So before making this video earlier, when I discovered this problem, because this is a real world problem, I'm remixing this track in real time. What I've basically done is pulled a little bit down on the volume of the input to this amplifier plugin, but then there's a compressor on the output, which is in itself actually hot. It's 0.7 dB. There's absolutely no need for it to be a positive value. I can use this gain knob, pull that down to about -3. That's going to give me the overhead that I need to solve the problem. Now when I send the signal back through Insight, my true peak is below -1. So still pretty close to 0, but close is fine. Anything below 0 is fine. This signal is then being further attenuated on my slider. So when it's being sent into the sub, everything is completely fine, and every single stage of the gain structure is well behaved. Okay, that's example number 1. That's dealing with a single track where you need to make sure that if you have an insert chain, every stage of that insert chain is well behaved, because Cubase doesn't monitor these moments in between insert plugins on your track. It monitors the input, it monitors the output, and it can show you both of them on the meter with your global meter settings, but it can't show you your insert levels. That's what you need to make sure that you don't break. The second example is when you're combining multiple tracks together into a sub bus. So I've got a perfect example of that in this track. I've got 4 blocks of 3 sets of harmonies. You can see 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is a situation where I had Pauline basically sing the same phrase over and over again. And I've used up to 3 of them at a time to make individual phrases. So this section of song that we've zoomed in on here, I just solo the harmony bus. That's 4 different phrases being sung 3 times. So each of these individual clusters is exactly the same phrase being sung 3 times. Now just have a look at this for magnificent gain staging. 0 all the way, slam it down on the output bus. No, don't do this. 2 years ago I thought you could get away with this. Now I know better. Let's do a bit of analysis on this track. So as you can see, I've just multi-selected all the sub buses and the main output bus. I'll link all these together and put an instance of Insight on each of the tracks. So here we have our 4 sub buses. Here's the master harmony bus. Each of the individual sub buses is okay. So we're basically never clipping on any of the individual tracks. The problem is that when those subs are being mixed together into the master bus, they're different phrases, but they are all volume being added together. So you're not going to get this perfect sine wave plus sine wave equals sine wave twice as loud. There's going to be some element of fuzziness here, but the fact is that 4 tracks basically doing a very similar thing. When you add them together, they are definitely going to get louder, and there's your proof. So we're already clipping. The situation is even worse than that, because as you can see, each of the individual tracks is also outputting to a vocal reverb. So if we have a look at the signal coming into the reverb, that's also clipping. So I'm breaking this signal in 2 different directions. One, mixing into the harmony bus, and secondly, mixing into the input of the reverb. And as you can see, I've attempted to solve this by simply turning the gain of the mixed tracks down. That is not good enough. The damage has already been done at input. You've already lost signal. Now, all of these send effects on the reverb, to be absolutely honest with you, these days I would put these reverbs on the subs. There's no need for each of these individual tracks to have their own send. So that's probably something that I will fix, but for the time being I don't need to. They're all post-mixer sends. So as you can see, I've selected all 12 tracks simultaneously. got Q-Link enabled, so I can now just pull all of them down. This takes 6 dB off the entire harmony bus. Now the sum mixed input from all of those buses going into the master female harmony bus. Totally well behaved, no red clipping on the vocal reverb, everything's fixed. So the takeaway here is that if you're mixing multiple different tracks together, particularly or more so if they're doing a similar kind of thing, but generally speaking, 2 audio tracks is going to be louder than 1. That's just a simple scientific fact. All of this energy is being cumulatively added together. There are incredibly rare fringe cases where if you have perfectly inverted waves, adding them together won't make them louder, but that's just silly. In the real world, in normal situations like this, 12 different tracks, all feeding into the same thing, it's just going to get louder and louder and louder and louder. The only way to solve that is to fix your inputs on the individual tracks so that when they all get added together, they're not going above 0. Hope this has been useful to you. Please hit like if it was. I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.